Olivia at the Humane Society of Northeast Georgia. We are here today. We are going to be doing rope toys. I've actually already done one right here. This is what it looks like. And for those of you that don't know, again, I'm Olivia. I'm a volunteer and education coordinator here at the Humane Society of Northeast Georgia, and we are going to be doing rope toys. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to just get your supplies together if you don't already, or to just go over, again, what you do need if you miss something. So today we are going to be using t-shirts for this. So we've got a couple different old t-shirts, a pair of scissors to be able, sturdy scissors to be able to get through the fabric. And I've also got some dog food here that I'm going to show you guys a cool thing that you can do at the end for enrichment. So that's a little extra. You don't necessarily need it for the toy, but a cool thing I'm going to show you guys at the end. So I'll give you guys a second to get all that together, and while you're doing that, I'm going to finish cutting this shirt. Don't worry, I'm not starting yet, because I'm also going to show you guys step-by-step with cutting this shirt, but I'm going to make sure that I've got enough panels to make this rope toy. So while you're getting everything together, I'm just going to finish cutting this shirt. And while you are getting your supplies, one of the things that I love about this at-home craft that then becomes a very functional toy that you can use to play with your dog is you don't have to be perfect. Like, it is very difficult to mess this up, which is great for me, being the perfectionist that I am. So it's a really nice toy to make. Anybody can make it. It's great for all ages. You can use, like I said, we're using t-shirts today. That's what I've got on hand. But you can also use old dish towels, laundry towels. Even if you've got like a really big beach towel, you could use that. It might take a little bit longer to cut, but you can use it. So it's a really great way to repurpose the things that you've got in your home and then use them as enrichment tools for your pups.
Dawn says hi. Dawn says hi.
Oh, hi, Dawn! You can use them for your pups at home, or you can donate them to your nearest shelter. And of course, we hope you keep us in mind. Without further ado, we're going to get started since I just finished cutting up those strands. So, I don't know if you want to try to come a little bit closer so they can see, but I've got my full t-shirt here. And again, different tutorials will show you different things. Like I said, it's really hard to mess this up. You could cut a square or rectangular panel in the middle. I'm actually going to try to cut and use as much of the t-shirt as possible because I actually want a thicker rope toy. So I'm going to start by just cutting off the sleeves. And if you hold the fabric tighter, it makes it easier to cut. So I'm just gonna put the sleeves off to the side. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually turn the shirt to the side so that I can cut the neck off. So I'll get, when I do cut strips, they're gonna be fairly even. And I don't have to have the neckline involved in that.
Allie Christensen says hi.
Hi, Allie. Okay, so I've cut that off. And then go back, and I'm gonna cut down the sides of the shirt to open up the side panels. And then I'll just cut to the sleeve here, opening up that side, and do the other side. So now I've got two layers here. And because I've got some pretty good scissors, I'm actually going to leave the layers together just to save time, so that it doesn't take me as long to cut all of these strips. So these are going to be for our shelter dogs, and because of that, I am purposely going to make them as thick as I possibly can and a little bit longer. So ideally I would have liked this one to be a little bit thicker, but you can see that it's pretty tight and it's a little bit longer, which is what I really like to have, particularly for our rescues, because you might get some that are super chewers, you might get some that aren't chewers, but you always just want to err on the side of caution and have them be thicker, because when they're thicker, they're less likely to chew them and then possibly swallow a part of the toy. The other benefit to having a thick toy, particularly for the shelter, is actually one thing that we have to consider here is there's a drain in the middle of the dog's kennel. So we don't, if the dog does destroy the toy and there's little bits lying around, we don't want those to go into the drain. That's gonna be a lot harder to do if the toy is really thick and tight and long. So I'm going to cut probably about 3 to 5 inch panels here on the shirt to make them thicker or wider, I should say, panels that I'm then going to use to braid. But again, if you're making these for your dogs at home, it's really based on what is best for your dog. My dog at home, she's not, you know, that big into toys. She's very gentle with hers, so I wouldn't necessarily need something that's really thick for her, but she is a bigger dog, so I would still want a bigger toy. Now, if you had a puppy, you could certainly make one like half the size of this, because a puppy, depending on the size of the puppy, if you had a Chihuahua puppy, you're not going to need to have as big a toy for them so that they can fit it in their little mouths. My last strip here. So you can see that I've now got a bunch of strips here, and for the purpose of braiding today, I'm actually going to take some of the strips that I cut earlier so that I can show you guys how to braid a little bit easier. I'm going to double up just as I cut these 2 at a time. I'm going to maintain them. I'm going to keep the 2 at a time because I want the toy to be thicker. So I'm going to take 2 of my white strips here from a white t-shirt that I had. I've got my blue, and I've got 2 black here. So you can see they're not all quite the same length. Let's see how the brown works. So the brown is a little bit shorter than the rest, but almost to show you guys how easy the toy is to make, and that really anything will work, I'll go ahead and do the brown. So you've got all your strips here. What we're gonna do is tie them together. And a really nice way to do this is actually if you use a bit of the sleeve. So you can use every bit of the t-shirt to help you make the toy, ends up with less scraps, and you've got a bigger toy. So I'm just gonna cut a line down the sleeve. And then, because the t-shirt is so stretchy, this might be a little bit harder with a dish towel, but because the t-shirt's so stretchy, I'm gonna cut 2 little strips from the sleeve of the shirt so that I can put all 3 of these together like this and tie them at just gonna pull that as tight as I can. And I'm gonna double knot it, just in case. And I'm also, because these are smaller strips, I'm gonna cut them because I wouldn't want the dog to get, to then swallow those little pieces. So I've got my toy here started. Now, I'm just gonna let it lay there, but it can sometimes be easier if you had like maybe painter's tape or even duct tape, depending on the table that you're working on, to tape the toy to the table so that when you start braiding, you don't have to hold the top as well. So I've got my 3 strips here, and what I'm gonna do is I think there's a couple different ways to braid, but I'm going to pull from the outside in. So I've got this now becomes my middle strip, and then pull from the outside in. So of course I'm doing this really loose right now, just to show you guys how that ends up working. So the way that I do it is just continue to pull from the outside over, and now, so that was just to show you guys, but I do want the toy to be tighter, so I'm gonna go back and just tighten this. So I've got my pieces here. This is how I usually hold them to braid. Pull from the outside over in, and then you can continue to like tug to tighten the braid. And again, I like to do that because I think it makes for a more enjoyable toy for the dog. And then it's also sturdier, it'll last longer. I'm just gonna do that all the way down. And you can see that they didn't end up being all the same length, but that is okay. So now I've got that second strip from the sleeve that I cut, and so I'm just going to use that to tie off the end. And again, I want that as tight as possible. Double knotting it. And cutting those little pieces just so the dog doesn't end up chewing those off and then potentially swallowing them. Okay, so I've got my toy. Because these aren't the same length all the way down, I don't really think it will affect the dog's ability to play with the toy, but I can cut these little pieces here so that they are even, and the focus again is on, you know, the dog playing with the middle of the toy instead of the end. Okay, and there you have it. You've got your rope toy. So you can see just how easy that was to make right from your home with supplies that you've already got at home. You may have had a shirt that you were thinking about donating, and now you can reuse it for your pup at home or for one of the rescues. Now, the last thing that I did want to show you guys about with the dog food that I have, you can also use training treats, which are just really tiny treats. But your dog, depending on how much your dog is motivated by food, you can really just use their kibble. Which is really nice because, again, you already have that at home as well. So when you've got, this ends up becoming like a little training treat. So not only does the dog get to play with the toy, but you can actually sort of open up, once you've made the toy, you can open up the braid a little bit and stick a treat underneath the braid so that the dog can start to sniff them out. You could just put them throughout the toy. Again, this is a really easy way, right from home, with really simple things like t-shirts or dish towels to create an enrichment, almost a puzzle for your dog, which is really good for them. I'm sure we all know right now how stir crazy things can get with quarantine. I know we're feeling it. We're probably, this is probably how the dogs feel, especially in a shelter. So we can do things to not only invite play, but also to encourage them to get their brains involved as well. It'll help tire them out and give them something to do throughout the day. And when they end up finding the treat in the toy, it ends up becoming its own reward for them as well. So I've now got about 4 different pieces of kibble throughout the treat. Now, depending on your dog and what you know about your dog, you may want to keep an eye on them. If they're a super chewer, you may just want to keep an eye on them when they are playing with the toy. If you know that they are quick to tear their toys apart, just for safety reasons. And so we definitely know that when we're at the shelter. If we've got dogs that want to chew up their toys, we're going to be a lot more careful about which toys we give them to make sure that they stay safe and healthy. I'm trying to think if there are any questions or anything that I missed. Anything? No?
Hold it up.
Here is your finished result. And it's nice because, you probably can't see. I don't know if you can see that I tucked in the treat there. And then I just layered that over. And again, the dog can sniff that out. It's a really great way to get their brains working, tire them out, and keep them busy, give them something to do, particularly while they're at the shelter. So, and that is your finished rope toy. And you can see I've got all these other pieces that I've got. I can probably make at least 3 more rope toys out of this. Especially not knowing sometimes what your dog may or may not like in terms of toys, particularly if you're a recent adopter. This is a great way to not spend a bunch of money on a bunch of different toys. Use what you've got at home that you were already planning on maybe throwing away or donating. You can repurpose it for your dog to figure out what kind of toys they do or don't like. So that is that.